But we're talking about movies now. One of the funniest ones was, this guy, I want to say he was from like Germany or maybe he's from Australia or something. And he got into football when he watched Gridiron Gang, like The Rock. Yeah, like he watched I think it's the Gridiron Gang, right? Where The Rock was a coach or something. He's coaching kids.
Yeah.
The Gridiron.
Or the Tooth Fairy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was playing some football on that one.
No, it was the Tooth Fairy. It was because he was babysitting. He was babysitting, and I remember it being like, I didn't know that movie was about football, but it was the Tooth Fairy. It was a Tooth Fairy.
There you go.
I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess.
It's not going to be that day. This one, I thought, like, once it started snowing, once Jameis threw that interception, Calvin Austin gets a touchdown, I thought it was going to be it.
Yeah. Like the little battle between Myles Garrett and TJ. Like, okay, who really is the number one defender?
See, and that's just it. Garrett is the better, but I think TJ Watt's going to win Defensive Player of the Year this year.
What's up, guys? I'm a Steelers fan as well.
What? What's up, brother?
Yeah, no, that was a very predictable loss. They're prone to those, like you said. They drop a couple games every season. They always play down to competition,
but they play up to competition, and it feels good.
Yep, and they'll make the playoffs. They'll figure out a way to make the playoffs.
Yep.
I wonder if Tomlin's just like, you know what, guys, it's a short week. Like, it's not worth the win. Or whatever, like hits like some kind of like cost benefit analysis in his mind, just because his record's so bad on Thursday, it just doesn't make sense.
I don't think Tomlin has ever said the words, I don't think it's worth the win in his life. I don't care if he's like heading to the ping pong table, man. That man, he's going to stare you down and want to win. I mean, there's something that doesn't connect, but it's certainly not that like motivation stuff.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm a Lakers fan too. And so most of my life, it's the same thing. Like, they'll play down to competition. They'll take it easy the first couple months, turn it up when they need it. All the way back to the Kobe Shaq days, they'll turn it up when they need it. And you knew they had enough firepower to come up with wins. So I've been like conditioned. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. Just make it to the playoffs. From there, anything happens.
I feel like that's one of the things, though, about the NBA with like how long that season is and how you play series instead of like a one-game playoff, right? So you're like, we can still win the series. You just kind of take it.
That's why I love that the Bengals. I mean, the Bengals still might make the playoffs, but I love that there is actually a legitimate chance that there are consequences for their actions, because they try to pull this shit every single year with Joe Burrow, where they take the entire month of September off and then start playing football. And it hasn't mattered yet, and they got to the Super Bowl doing this, and this year it might actually matter. And yet, I mean, the Broncos aren't exactly a juggernaut, so they could definitely catch up to them.
Just gotta get that bar every time, huh, Colt?
Mark, where'd you grow up? Are you an LA guy? You got the UCLA swag.
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up a UCLA fan. I ended up going to San Diego State, but
cool.
My uncle went to UCLA. My best friends played there, so I grew up a UCLA fan. So big week for the Bruins this week.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We all playing.
SC rivalry week.
Oh, okay. What is that rivalry called?
Crosstown rivalry. I don't know.
Okay. They don't have a name.
No, yeah, it's
LA cares more about this than their NFL team's rivalry.
Yeah, the Big Ten rivalry between LA and USC.
Yeah.
Thanks for chatting it up, guys. Cole, you already took us into the interview. We're here. We're recording.
What up?
You've met two Steelers fans, a Broncos fan, a sad Titans fan. Here we are. Mark, thanks for hopping on. We're going to talk football. I want to talk first about your career a little bit in the NFL, and have Cole and Alex hop in as you guys have questions. And then we all talk about the football movies. We good with that?
Sounds awesome.
Cool. if we
I noticed, Tristan, that you did not fill out our document. Are you just
No,
moderating our
you know,
conversation? Are you keeping it a secret? And you don't think we can talk about 12 movies and 9 is a better thing?
I don't think we can talk about enough. Also, after going through the list of movies, I'm like, I think I've seen like 4 football movies. I do not have a good enough list
Oh,
here.
I've got football movies takes. Like, I can't wait to get there. So,
So I'm going to comment. Madison was going to join us as well, but he couldn't make it today. So here we are. Let's kick into it. You guys have already met. Mark, you went to San Diego State. You grew up Southern California. What was life like before coming to the NFL?
Yeah, so I grew up in LA, went to San Diego State, spent 9 years in San Diego, really enjoying San Diego, and got a little bit of a slow start to getting into sports, getting into football. Although I did work for the San Diego State football team when I was in school, and then just took little side projects here and there to stay in that realm while working a 9 to 5, non-sports related to pay the bills. Kind of a brief background, got into a consulting company called Optimum Scouting with Eric Galco, who's currently the head of the East-West Shrine Game. And then also took on projects with the XFL in their personnel departments. And then what brought me back to LA from San Diego was an opportunity to work at USC's football operations department about 10 years ago. Gosh, it flew by. And from there, opening in the NFL's analytics and research department came about, and I applied and got it. And since 2014, I've been with the NFL, and now in a different capacity. So I'm currently with the NFL's International Player Pathway Program as the lead scout for the program. And that's quite a unique position. It's taken me on a lot of adventures. It's made me a world traveler, which I never thought I would use to describe myself, but I'm enjoying it. And it's definitely a really unique and fun challenge.
Before we go into the exciting stuff, all those years in San Diego, did you ever become a Chargers fan?
First of all, I've always grown up a Steelers fan because of my dad. And I just always enjoyed the NFL. I've enjoyed players. I've enjoyed just different teams and styles. And so I had a lot of respect for those mid 2000s Chargers teams with LT and Merriman and
yeah, who can't respect being first in offense, first in defense, and not making the playoffs? It's the most respectable way to play football.
Yeah. I mean, it was nuts. And being in San Diego during that time, I mean, the fans obviously, were crazy about him, and LT, shattering records. And, it seemed like every weekend he was scoring 2 to 3 touchdowns. Just really a wild time. And then, they just happened to run into some juggernauts and the Colts and the Patriots and some unfortunate luck.
Nice. Okay. And you don't want to become a fan now that you're living in LA. Can we have 2 teams? Can we have a local team?
Yeah, no, I like the Chargers. It's odd seeing 2 teams in LA growing up here, and we had no teams, which is one of the big reasons So yeah, it's wild going from no teams to now we have 2 sharing the same stadium and trying to, pull the fan base from both ends. But hey, it's more entertainment for the city, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a vacation destination for all the away fans.
Yeah.
Not wrong. Well, speaking of vacations, okay, so now you're on the international team. You're the lead international talent scout.
Yeah, so I'll give you the brief rundown of what the program is and what I do.
Yeah.
So the International Player Pathway, the NFL wants to expand its market internationally. Part of that expansion is by bringing in international talent into the league. So, doing much of what the NBA's done such a great job of bringing in international athletes, and they've become superstars. And now the NBA's got huge markets in places like China, Europe, Africa, really around the world, because of the Doncic's and the Yao Mings and the Giannis's and all those guys. So the NFL is trying to do something similar. I created the IPP. Really in 2018 was its launch, and my job as an international scout for the IPP is to look for international athletes to develop and play in the NFL. The biggest athlete that's come through the program is Jordan Mailata. He's the starting left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles. The top 5 paid player at his position. Just really a freak of nature, kind of all the stars aligned, going to the Eagles, who had interest in developing him, had one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, and he got to play alongside 3 future Hall of Famers in Jason Kelsey, Jason Peters, and Lane Johnson. So, between being a freak athlete and playing in that environment, it all kind of worked out with him. So he's really set the standard for the program, and now teams come to our program and looking for another Mailata or someone as impactful or more impactful. So yeah, so my job is to really scour the earth for athletes who meet, the NFL standard in terms of athletic traits, but also character and, and other things. But yeah, that's kind of a brief description of what I do.
It's got to be part of your department, right? That is heading off those little patches that end up on the back of helmets and on coaches' jerseys, on coaches' sweaters as well. That even the ones that have gone through the more traditional NFL path to making it in the NFL, going to college, there's a lot of colleges out there that are getting an international audience into their programs.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my specialty is finding guys who are a little bit older who aren't necessarily going to be going through getting into the NFL through the college route. So it's 20 to 24 years old. We also have, the NFL has what's called the NFL Academy, which is similar to, if you're familiar with IMG Academy here in the States, it's a football academy. And they have an academy in London. They have one in Australia, the Gold Coast in Australia. So those are academies that look for kids who are basically doing their high school education, developing as football players, and then moving on to, potential scholarship opportunities and going into the NFL. So a little bit of a separate entity, but it's kind of one big team that we have in the NFL's international department. So we kind of help each other out. As you can imagine, as I'm looking for athletes, I run into trainers and coaches, say, hey, look at this kid. He's only 16, but he's interested. I'm like, okay, I'll connect him with the academy people. And it's vice versa. They might connect me with somebody who's a little bit older, 20, 21 years old, who might be aged out of that. So it's one team working together to just, get these international athletes an opportunity and a pathway to the NFL.
Is it a little bit of a kind of a chicken and egg question here? Is there things where Roger Goodell's like, we want to be in this market or in this country, go find an athlete there? Or is it kind of you find this athlete, just the needle in the haystack, and then they try and build up around that community?
Yeah. So the big picture, or taking a couple steps back from where I am, kind of in the weeds a little bit in the scouting and talent identification. The tentpole events that the NFL holds and the events that they have internationally are certainly targeted to those markets that are hot markets like Germany, the UK, South America and Brazil and those areas. Obviously, we see games being played in those areas, and they certainly target activations in those areas for sure. As far as finding talent, honestly, it's, hey, wherever we can find talent. I mean, it's like NFL players aren't growing on trees. A lot of great athletes around the world, a lot of fantastic athletes around the world, but it's a highly, highly skilled sport that requires a lot of development and a lot of commitment to developing. So, it's really about, for me, it's about finding athletes where if you find them, great. If they're coming from Germany, great. If they're coming from the UK, great. But certainly not, investing more resources into certain areas just because of the market. We want to invest more resources to the areas that have talent.
Yeah, when it comes to that, what are some of the important key it factors when you're looking at, like you said, that 20 to 24 range, people playing other sports and things like that? What kind of makes them stand out as like they'd be good for not just anything, the NFL?
Yeah. So, and this is just based on feedback from teams over the years of, from guys that we've sent to teams and just general surveying the league. They come to us for outlier athletes, outlier size. And so if you have both, if you have a big guy who's really athletic, that's ideal, obviously. So linemen, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, those are the easiest to make the transition. Not to say that they're the lesser skilled positions, but on offense, it's, hey, block the guy in front of you. On defensive line, it's see ball, get ball. And that's a really obviously simplistic way to put it, but it's more than, or it's less than, say a wide receiver. It's like, hey, be a world-class athlete, run a precise route and beat the other world-class athlete. Oh, by the way, catch the ball and create after the catch. And oh, by the way, make adjustments on the fly according to changing. You can see that there's a lot more to it, the way you get to the course. So to answer your question, it's outlier size, I'd call it, 6'4" plus outlier athletes. And obviously in that age range to where, if it takes them 3 years to develop, they're not pushing 30 years old. They're in their early to mid 20s when they're ready to, graduate from their international roster spot in the practice squad and into the active roster, which is kind of how it works. You start out in that international roster spot. So you mentioned it, Tristan, like crossover athletes. When I first started this position in 2022, I'm coming from a world of evaluating NCAA athletes, guys who've grown up playing football, going to the NFL. So this was new to me, evaluating international athletes. And it is really apparent right away that while there's a lot of football being played overseas, a lot of the best athletes from around the world are playing the top sports in their country simply because there's money in it. There's not a lot of money, if any, in American football overseas. So, if you're in France, they've got some great rugby teams there, some great basketball being played there. So top athletes, as they're coming up, they're being noticed for their athleticism. They're falling into basketball. They're falling into rugby. And then really the remains generally are, hey, we like football still. We want to play football. So they're playing in these leagues. So they're getting taught how to play the game and fundamentals. But they're just not the best athlete. They're not NFL caliber athletes. So I came to our group and said, hey, we should put a premium on crossover athletes around the world because those are where we're going to find the best athletes. So, and it's a little bit of a challenge with that. Like they have less experience with football. So,
yeah,
conceptually they're learning, where to line up as a defensive end. They're learning where to line up as an offensive guard. So, that's the challenge with that. That's the catch-22 with that is you get the better athlete, better pedigree, but from a skill point, you're much further behind. So it's trying to find a little bit of a balance as much as possible. But we'd rather work with traits than not have traits.
Yeah.
With like positions, I'd assume you get, you're talking about crossover athletes. You have kickers and punters, kind of the Soccers or the Aussies seem to be very popular with punting. And then do you guys just put an emphasis front seven on the defense, offensive line with the rugby players? I mean, you're looking for size. Is that kind of where you're at? And you guys have said, I don't know if we're going to be pulling a quarterback out of this program or, like you said, a receiver or defensive back. How's kind of like that, like prioritization go through?
Exactly. So obviously, around the world, no matter what sport they end up in, they started out with soccer, as we call it here in the US. We actually just got a green light for kickers and punters last year, about a year ago. So it's somewhat new for the program, but the NFL is really excited about, that potential. Obviously we see it in the NFL already, international kickers and punters, and there's much more of them. They just, need that opportunity. So that's something that we're really focused on targeting over the, as we move forward here. And then it's looking at, the offensive and defensive line, those rugby players who are physical, who have, who thrive in contact sports, who have the size, obviously, like a Jordan Mailata. He came from rugby. When he came to us in 2018, he was 6'6", 315 pounds and could run. So, he was kind of unique, but physically there's a bunch of guys like that out there. It's just a matter of finding the ones that want to make the transition and also fall in that range, that age range. But physically there are Mailatas out there. They're playing rugby and they're playing other sports. So it's not about finding the physical talents, it's about finding the intangibles, the guys who can develop, who are smart enough to develop, and who want to. So, and then as far as like quarterbacks, it's just not a whole lot of, there isn't enough high-level coaching and football being played overseas to really, I get asked, are you looking for the next Brady, the next Tom Brady? It's like, shoot, if I find the next Tom Brady, I'm all in on that, right? I'm just trying to find, a way to become an agent and, ride that wave. It's just not a realistic goal at this point. It's not something that we don't completely ignore, the quarterback position, but we're not going to invest a lot of resources and time into looking for quarterbacks. It's just not there yet overseas.
What are some of the misconceptions about international players and recruiting over there?
Good question. I guess the biggest misconception is that it's just not being played to the degree that it's being played. Like the biggest league in Europe is called the European League of Football, and there's 16. I think there's 16 teams now, and they televise some of those games. They stream most of them. They've got a whole social media team that, if you follow those accounts for the teams or the league, like you can catch highlights as they're happening. Joe Thomas was the offensive line coach for the Munich Ravens this last year. Jim Tom Sula is winning championships, with the Rhein Fire in Germany.
Wow.
Norm Chow was coaching out there last year. So there's a lot of football being played. That's the biggest league. Japan has the X League, which is probably, in terms of football IQ, they're probably the second most developed to the ELF and one of the Germany leagues as well. So I guess the misconception is that it's not being played, at least, especially beyond flag football. Because now we see flag football kind of everywhere, and it's, easy to pick up because it's kind of an economical. You just get some flags on a field and a ball. But that tackle football, the misconception that tackle football isn't really being played overseas. It really is. It's just there's not a ton of financing in it at this point. So again, they're not attracting those star athletes yet.
Yeah.
You said Rhein Fire. That means they were able to retain some branding from the old NFL Europe from our childhood, right? Like that was the developmental league. And when you talk about, how to find players, the traditional methods for the NFL, it's stuck in just the NFL draft. And the NFL draft honestly is the best product of all the major leagues in America as far as getting you there. But sometimes that's because all of the other leagues have such developed minor league program. Minor league baseball is massive across small towns in the US, and basketball has G League, but also these really developed international leagues too. The NFL was doing NFL Europe for a little while, but it was a lot of just American guys going over to play in the summer before preseason ball hyped up and they got their practice squad spots, right? Like that's how I remember it, right?
Yeah. And it was a great developmental opportunity for a lot of those guys. And
and hopefully it was going to promote some interest in American football in these big European towns that, had teams.
In my personal opinion, this isn't the NFL talking, but if we had social media and technology that we have now, I think NFL Europe would have survived.
Yeah.
You could follow it a little bit easier. You get invested in the stories a little bit more. Honestly, I was a little confused when I first started this and learned about the ELF, and the Rhein Fire is still there. The Frankfurt Galaxy is still there. The Barcelona Dragons are still there. But it was very clear right away that there's absolutely no association anymore with the NFL. NFL made that very, very clear with me. So, but in terms of the names and the branding, yes, a lot of them are still out there.
Which meant that they had staying power. Like if the organizations are going to rename your new organization that has no affiliation with the NFL, the Rhein Fire, that means the people in the Rhine area had interest in the Rhein Fire when they were there. Same with Frankfurt Galaxy, and that's
absolutely.
Hamburg Sea Devils, was it like that? I remember I was watching some NFL Europe in my summertime in 2007.
Yeah,
I just remember beating up on them in Madden.
I was the Admirals, the Centurions. Yeah, those are your
always points in a game,
I remember seeing that. Yeah, I remember playing Madden. I'm like, that's cool that these teams are on here, but why are they on here? Because you just smash them to death, right? But yeah, no, it's hopefully, at some point there's some sort of, and every year more and more American coaches and former players are heading over there for, it's really an 8-month contract at a time. And I don't want to call it, their vacation, but they can coach football in their sleep, right? So they go coach some basic football stuff, bring their families over for 8 months, hang out in Germany for 8 months, hang out in Spain for 8 months. It's a pretty cool deal for them, and staying in the game, get to travel a little bit and spreading the word and spreading the game. So hopefully we see more and more of that.
Sabbatical for those coaches in between the big gigs. They just need to stay away for a little bit, or someone who just got bought out, like an Ed Orgeron or someone like that. Is that what you're kind of seeing? And then some of these American players who maybe I went undrafted, or the USFL is not picking me up, I'm going to go over there. Is that what you're seeing more of?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, some names.
You drop Norm Chow and some of these other guys. I'm like, dang, he's over there? That's kind of a big name.
Yeah, for as far as coaching goes, yes, there's been some big names like that, and then like players. There's some guys, if you follow college teams, you'll recognize some of the Division One names that head over there and try their hand and see how they do in Europe and get a little vacation out of it. But I'm trying to think of an example of somebody you guys would know, but
I
they're
just feel
probably
like
not.
most athletes, they end up in the USFL or the Canadian Football League, not crossing the pond.
Cavante Turpin at Dallas Cowboys, he played in the ELF for a year, then got a shot and played. I think he was like the MVP of the UFL or USFL, and then obviously got a shot with the Cowboys, and now he's a dynamic NFL return man for the Dallas Cowboys. So he'd be an example of a guy that came from the ELF.
What's going to be the X factor, the it factor that moves international recruiting and football worldwide beyond 2 games in London, 1 game in Germany, 1 game in Mexico to an international league? In your opinion?
My hot take is that we're going to have at least 2 teams that are based internationally in the next 10 years. There's too much money.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that we know about the NFL is that they don't shy away from where the money is. So, we've seen that in any scenario you can really think of, any sort of development over the past, especially, 5, 8 years, it sees where the money's at and it's going to find a way to capitalize it. So, my guess would be Germany, UK. There's been talk about the UK Jaguars for a while.
Forever.
As long as it exists,
So it just makes too much. I mean, the way that the NFL's continuously capitalized on where there's value, it just makes too much sense that to have teams overseas and have more of a presence there.
How does the NFL avoid the University of Hawaii kind of thing where that team becomes a little insignificant? Everyone hates scheduling games over there. I mean, I feel like the NFLPA is kind of the biggest hurdle to this international thing. The players come out in Brazil, they hate the turf, or that flight's really hard, busting with the boys, they mentioned that. Like, it's just like you're on that flight, you got to sit for 16 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't have I'm not smart enough to give an answer to that. Otherwise,
You haven't invented the air travel that helps make this a possibility yet?
I mean, I know that there's a lot more technological advancements, obviously in the last, especially in the last 10 years, that makes travel a lot easier. I mean, just sleep, be able to get proper sleep on these planes. They have like certain machines. If you go to the NFL Combine, they have all kinds of vendors that are promoting this new technology to help with travel, and it's like certain lighting that you can add to your flights and certain sleep things that you can wrap yourself in and change.
We're getting out of football movies and getting into like alien movies where you got to go into cryo sleep before you make the 100-mile journey.
Yeah, and I think we get to a point where they find something that's good enough to and they'll modify
Sell it to the PA.
and do what they need to do. They'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
If it needs to be 2 bye weeks, whatever they need to do.
I think a lot of players, I think George Kittle is kind of the champion of that, to get the 2 bye weeks going. So I think that's definitely a change coming
Especially
down.
with the longer season. Yeah, you sell that to the PA and then additional out of market, these international games. That's on the horizon. That's easy to.
Maybe the increased roster sizes. Yeah, so there's a lot of different solutions, quote unquote, on the table that, again, I'm several levels below those decisions.
Final question before we move to movies.
Yeah.
Let's say someone's coaching a flag football team, but they really want to coach. Do they go over to Europe or somewhere else, get some experience coaching teams over there and developing players, and then come back? Just hypothetical.
This oddly specific example. Tristan.
Oddly specific Alex Doss position right here.
Listen, there's certainly teams overseas that could use any sort of, how do I say this without sounding pretentious American, but like
experience, right?
Real
Like
experience.
Just
growing
being
up in
around
it.
being around the game in the way that it's been brought up successfully here in the States. It's our game, right? So we've been around it since we were kids, and we've seen coaching. We've played Madden our whole lives or whatever it is. Not to say that's all you need to coach, but there's teams over there that could definitely use that American influence in how they coach and how they approach coaching. I mean, I don't know, coming from flag to tackle football, that's It's
that's
a little
a
bit,
big step.
a little bit of a
There's a
leap.
couple baby steps.
May want to go from
There's a
flag to
high
like high
school.
school here and then go over, but that's a little bit of a leap.
Yeah.
All right, all
Yeah.
right.
There's some steps in between, but it wouldn't be the worst idea ever.
Well, take some notes here, Alex. All right. Well, I think that's a good way to end this segment to move on to the best football movies, because in my mind, too, I wonder about the power of Hollywood and how we show football in movies, and how with international box offices or social media, if that helps to kind of grow the game elsewhere. I mean, I just remember being in London and everyone loved Odell Beckham Jr. And I was like, why? How do you even know who this guy is? The jerseys everywhere. And I'm like, you have never watched a game in your life, but they all do the highlights from TikTok and Instagram.
Real quick on that, before we get into it. So one of the questions I asked these guys in my interviews with these prospects is like, how familiar are you with football? Like, what do you know about football? Especially if they're coming from another sport, right? And it's, I watch Tom Brady, or I watch Tyreek Hill, or I like Odell Beckham. Like,
Yeah.
interesting, right? Like, it's just, they named some random, I mean, not that he's random. Like, obviously he had a nice little career, and obviously he had a highlight guy. But they do watch highlights, and obviously he had a lot of the highlights and the dancing and the showmanship that matters. That gets caught in it, and social media runs with it.
It matters to American kids too. Like
Exactly, 100%. But we're talking about movies now. One of the funniest ones was, this guy, I want to say he was from like Germany, or maybe he's from Australia or something. And he got into football when he watched Gridiron Gang, like The Rock. Yeah, like he watched I think it's the Gridiron Gang, right? Where The Rock was a coach or something. He's coaching kids.
Yeah.
The Gridiron.
or the Tooth Fairy. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was playing some football on that one.
No, it was the Tooth Fairy. It was because he was babysitting. He was babysitting, and I remember it being like, I didn't know that movie was about football, but it was the Tooth Fairy. It was the Tooth Fairy.
There you go.
I had to look it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess.
The Tooth Fairy did good in the world, at least for one person.
So yeah, they name some random movies sometimes. Blind Side, I've heard the Blind Side too. So
yeah, terrible.
Top Gun Maverick, they play football on the beach. Count it.
Well, let's kick it off. Mark, you start with your first. What is to you a great football movie?
All right, so I'll be honest. I almost want to put this in as an honorable mention, but I saw someone I forgot who one of you guys took, Friday Night Lights. I love that movie. That would have made my top 3, but for the sake of differentiating my lists, I kept it off. But Friday Night Lights definitely would be in my usual top 3.
I'm glad that you couched there, because your top 2 movies here, honestly, all 3 would have been higher than the 3 that I ended up with, because I was the last person into the doc on this little exercise. So you can brag about your movies, and then I will also, because I love all 3 of these.
Sure. So I'll start out with my favorite, Any Given Sunday.
That's the right answer.
Came out in 1999. So to me, obviously it's overly dramatic, right? Like, and around this time I was just starting to play like tackle football, or just, putting the helmet on. And so just, I remember seeing the movie in theaters, and they have the camera, like you have the face mask on. It's like, you couldn't even decipher what's happening. Like, everything seemed so chaotic. And I was like, God, is that what it's like to play tackle football? Like, is that what it's like to play in the NFL? It's really not, but everything's overly dramatic. And come on, like LT's in it, playing basically himself
at 40 years old.
And it just captures so many storylines of like an NFL franchise, from the medical to the old vet, at the twilight of their careers, to the young guys coming up, the quote unquote like Michael Vick before Michael Vick was a thing. I mean, and LL Cool J, and the fact that LL Cool J had actual beef with, was it Jamie Foxx? They got into like an actual fight in real life. And gosh, Willie Beam, like Stephen Willie Beam, it just
the song that Stephen Willie Beam, like,
yes, and the NutriFit or whatever that commercial, it just captured the late 90s. It captured that era of football so well. It had legitimate athletes in it. One of the notes I wrote for this, I wanted to bring up Alan Graff. He played football at USC back in like the 60s or 70s, and he actually had a son who played football at USC. He's an offensive lineman in the mid 2000s, I think, or late 2000s. and he stayed around the game by becoming a football choreographer for like Hollywood. So a lot of the better football movies you've seen, and a lot of the better football scenes you've seen in movies, because we know they can be really bad sometimes.
So
A lot of the better ones are choreographed by Alan Graff, and he's an actual football player who like will put together actual plays, who will work with actual athletes as, extras on the field. And so he did a lot of these football scenes, which is why they look, so realistic, relatively speaking, right? And so just that and a lot, kind of another fun fact about this, a lot of my buddy who played at UCLA, he played quarterback at UCLA, he told me that there's a bunch of guys that graduate college and they don't make it to the league or whatever, but they still want to stay in shape or whatever. So if they're at USC or UCLA, Hollywood's right around the corner, they'll stick around, and there's like a group of them that are just extras for these sports movies, for these football movies. So they'll just be random guys in pads on the field who know the concepts that are being choreographed, so it makes it look more realistic. So anyway, there's like a group of guys that come up every year that are in these movies.
So I was a marching band kid that just liked watching football, but the USC, the Trojans marching band, is the marching band for every single Hollywood movie. No matter, they've played, high school bands and college bands and pro bands and whatever.
Yeah, it makes sense, and they have one of the best
LA
schools in America. So yeah, just the and then I think Michael Irvin's in it. Bellamy is like one of the receivers.
Jim Brown.
Like it's like the key distinguisher in all of these movies. I watched a bunch of them. Is there's movies you can tell where football people are around, and this is a football people movie, and then there's the one where all the theater kids are like, "This is what football's like." It's not even close. Not even close.
Yeah. So that's really all I'll say about that. It's just you put it really great there, Alex. Like it's a football movie, and you can tell it's being created and produced by football people. Number 2 on my list is Remember the Titans. Obviously it's a Disney movie, but it's like a good Disney movie. It doesn't seem like it has moments where it seems a little Disney-ish, but overall it's kind of a deep movie. It's kind of a powerful movie. And look, it's Denzel. Denzel's, one of my favorite actors. Quick side note, I met Denzel one time unexpectedly at a diner at 3 a.m, 10 years ago in Hollywood. Yeah. So big Denzel fan. Denzel's playing himself in this, right? He kind of plays the same character and everything, but it just works. It's kind of star-studded cast. Before you knew him, you got Gosling. The liability at corner we see on social media. Never forget, Ryan Gosling was a liability at corner, and then guy from Scrubs,
Donald Faison, yeah.
Guy from Scrubs, guy from Sons of Anarchy, guy from The Wire, guy from
My Name is Earl.
Did stuff.
Yes, young Hayden Panettiere, who seemed like she turned into an adult in like 3 years after this movie came out.
Yeah.
So it's a fun movie, but it's got some meaning to it, and it's and then just the end, man. Never forgets the night they played the Titans. Like, oh man, it's so cool. And then finally,
great speech too. I think that's the thing. Like Any Given Sunday, the Inches speech.
Yes.
Remember the night they played the Titans? Like there has to be that key motivational speech in the movie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All due respect, coach. You asked us to be perfect, or they don't gain another yard. And remember the Titans, extremely quotable. So those are your top 2. For my money, and this is my take on football movies, is that those are the only 2 good football movies, and they play the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Remember the Titans does the motivational schmaltzy Disney crap of it, where like you want to believe that a group of people can come together and sports can do that. Cool. Any Given Sunday gives it to you the real life, where it's a bunch of pretty selfish guys most of the time that this becomes their job, and there's so many other factors once you grow up and realize that football is a business, and it can be a dirty, gross, and like you cheat to win kind of business if you can. And those both did it really well. And then there's a lot of other movies. And so the next one you're talking about, it's a good movie, not enough football. It's not a football movie.
So you don't think Jerry Maguire is a football movie?
Jerry Maguire is a rom-com.
Oh, no.
Ooh.
No.
Who is Jerry Maguire in this movie? Jerry Maguire is not a football player. Jerry Maguire is the agent that falls in love with someone and has interactions with football.
So, okay. I get it, and I get where you're coming. I get where you're coming from on this because yes, there is certainly like 20% of that movie where is very fast forwardable for sure. But the rest of it, I go back to there were enough football people around it to make the football parts work, and I made sure to write down some notes here because I knew I was going to get some backlash on this.
I'll give any backlash.
First of all, very nostalgic, for me. It captures the 90s perfectly. Just like, Cameron Crowe, he just does that with his movies. He captures the era really well. The cameos are fantastic. Rod Tidwell, Cuba Gooding's character is based on Tim McDonald, 49er, integral part of the 49ers dynasty in the 90s. Troy Aikman, Drew Bledsoe, Rod Moore, Warren Moon, Art Monk. The last running back to ever be selected number 1 in the draft, Kijana Carter, is in it. And what's great about that is like he's in this movie. Obviously, he becomes one of the biggest busts in NFL history, right? But at the point of filming, he's the number 1 running back.
Penn State legend.
Penn State legend. So everybody's thinking this guy's going to be the next NFL star. So he's in this movie. The Monday Night Football scene is filmed during a real Arizona-Dallas Christmas game in 1995. They had to extend the halftime show or the halftime period to film the end zone scene. And the Cuba Gooding stunt double, number 85, he's walking out, or he runs out with the team, the actual Cardinals team. And there's stories about how they're all confused because Rod Moore's number 85 for the Cardinals, but who's this little guy? So just, Tom Cruise is hanging out in the Cardinals locker room and players are confused. Like, why is Tom Cruise in here? Anyway, so it's a lot of the cameos. Every time I watch it, there's someone new that I spot. Jay Moore's in it, like very 90s, early 2000s type of guy. But yeah, there's a lot of cameos and it's entertaining, man. It's based off Lee Steinberg, one of the bigger, power agents of the last couple of generation or last generation. So it's more of the football part's definitely more of the business part of it and the agent player relationship, which to me is a big part of football. And then, yes, of course, you have the Renee Zellweger and Tom Cruise stuff. And the little kid asks, you find out how much the brain weighs. What is it, 8 pounds or something? Yeah, man, it's a very rewatchable movie for me, mostly because of the nostalgia and those cameos.
So Mark and his partner can agree to watch the movie, but for different reasons. And that right there might just be why it wins the list, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? There's actually something that she wanted me to settle here, which I'm already gonna know your answer, and help me settle a household debate here. Is Bring It On a football movie?
Like the cheerleading one?
Look,
there's the answer.
I'd like to.
Doss watched like 20 football movies in preparation for this. Bring It On wasn't one of them.
I mean, cheerleading is a component.
You don't need to explain. The no is fine. That's all I needed.
There's more football in The Dark Knight Rises and Starship Troopers than there is in Bring It On.
Yeah.
That's true.
Starship Troopers. That would have been a good one. Anyways, we can move on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm stunned. Yeah. I do like, though, we'll segue quick, that we all put Rudy as one of our least favorite movies. Like when there was like a try and get different ones, and everyone's like, nope, Rudy is one of the worst football movies of them all.
I can go down do we want to do the least favorites?
Yeah, why not? We're already here. Let's do your least favorites.
All right, so Rudy's on there, right? So listen, I'm just going to go with Joe Montana. I'm going to side with Joe Montana on this one. And if you've ever seen interviews about him talking about Rudy, because he played with Rudy, quote unquote, played with Rudy, right? Like Rudy's on the team. Him and like the rest of the team hated Rudy. And he's the try-hard. It's a movie about a freaking try-hard who puts everybody else on the team in danger by going 100% in like walkthroughs and like he is a danger to the team. There is one of these guys in every high school you've ever been to, and every college you've ever been to, and every job you've ever been in. He's kind of like the original Karen, I guess. Like, I'm getting my way or else, and do what I need to do to get my way. Just what a pretentious prick. So, yeah, a movie about this kid who, is a try hard and again, putting everybody in danger. Great Vince Vaughn. I don't know if that's a cameo, but Vince Vaughn fighting in the movie. But outside of that, yeah, just terrible. Why do you guys hate Rudy?
Same. I just like, if I complain enough and I try my hardest, I can get where I want. And this isn't when Notre Dame is kind of what we had, like kids who grew up today know Notre Dame. This was back when like they were dominant and everything was good. And it's just, it doesn't feel like a lot of football people are around this movie. You're sitting there watching the football. You're like, did anyone play football that's involved in this movie?
Right.
I think that's kind of one of my biggest reasons why I don't like it.
Another part of it is I've just never, I grew up, I grew up Catholic and I went to Catholic school my whole life. So there was always like fans of Notre Dame just because they're a Catholic school. I'm like, that's it? Like, they're Catholic schools, you're just going to ride with them. And, and it's the whole, they rode on the history for such a long time. This is like a part of their history. And I'm not trying to bash Notre Dame by any means here, but I have a lot of respect for the program. But just growing up, it just always seemed like, oh, it's Notre Dame, the Golden Domers, and you just have to respect them. And it's like, well, it's you
don't have to. That's
you're not offended anyone in this podcast.
Nope.
And then my least favorite football movie of all time is Varsity Blues, and I feel like people are very hit or miss on this. In my experience, in my friend group, it's very much like you love it or hate it. I have a lot of friends that love this movie. I can't stand this movie. No football people in this. It's like written by a 14-year-old. The accents, like I'll just start with the accents. They're awful. James Vanderbeek, he did his thing in Dawson's Creek and then, had this and has some of the worst quotes of all time. I don't want your laugh. Like some horrible accents. Billy Bob, like I saw this as a kid and I'm like, look, this unhealthy, obese man, this is not good. Like, there's no way he's good at football. Why are they trying to make him out to be, and I don't think they made him out to be a good football player, but he couldn't move. Like, how is he starting for the state champion football? Just none of it made sense. And gosh, and John Voight, like, I love John Voight, and he was just out of place in this movie. Like, he kind of, we talk about playing down to your competition. Like he played down to his competition with the acting role in it. It just was overall, it just was a very childish movie and just the writing was just awful. It's like, it was made for 13-year-olds. And if you're older than like 13 or 14 and you still like this movie, like what's wrong with you?
I was trying to fit in a good comedy, and there are great sports comedies out there. We don't have a good football comedy. And part of it is it's become so obvious when non-football people are making a movie and football isn't around it. And when you're just making a slapstick comedy anyway, it's tough to get like jazzed up about making it really, adherent to what the sport is. And so, yeah, this just falls into the brand of they were trying to make a comedy movie and picked football as the starting point, and it didn't work.
Yeah. How many scenes from that movie pop up in Not Another Teen movie? I was like, oh, that's what they're spoofing. Oh, that's what they're spoofing.
Yep.
Oh, that's what they're spoofing. And it just feels like this movie where theater kids are like, we're going to make fun of football. Like like Billy Bob, like all of them are dumb and fat and don't know what they're doing. And like, it's this like concussion smear campaign with Billy Bob. And then John Voight is just all coaches are absolute assholes or dicks to their players kind of
Which
thing.
Again, all those injuries and concussion things, they come up done better in good movies. Yeah. But again, this is just a dumb teen comedy that isn't done well.
I think the 13-year-old wrote it is definitely like a perfect description.
And it's the same with a lot of those kind of late 90s teen movies that, Can't Hardly Wait and She's All That and, all those like American Pie was probably the best done of all of them, right? Like just because that's kind of the most classic one of all of them. But yeah, this is just so obviously, that's a good point. Like, theater kids wrote it and what they all see football to be and firing the coach and then player coaching at the end. And it's like Paul Walker, like he's randomly in it. R.I.P. Anyway, so that's my list. I'll let you guys get to yours.
Wait, before we go any further, if it tells you anything, I had to look this up. I was like, did this movie get any awards? It did win awards. MTV Movie Awards, Teen Choice Awards. So I guess there it is. It's just
That's
a
their
really
audience.
bad end of the 90s boy band loving bad movie.
This says more about MTV than anything else.
True.
Yeah.
True. Let's take it over to Alex.
All
Kick us
right.
off with your list.
Yeah. Right off the bat, Cole, I'm going to disagree. Friday Night Lights is a phenomenal football movie. I think it is like the pinnacle of football movies because it's based off of a book where a guy literally went down to West Texas and wanted to do it. And I don't fully remember the story, but somehow Bill Belichick is involved with the author, and the author was talking to him. And originally, he wanted to go to like East Pennsylvania, kind of where all those quarterbacks from the 80s and 90s grew up. And they told him, no, you got to go out to West Texas. So he gets out there, and it's so clear that this is around football for football. There's tons of people involved. I love the emotions. I was so surprised how little of the football was involved in the movie. There's like the crazy dad with Billings. They didn't go into his story, but Billingsley is like one of the top running backs in the Dakotas, Iowa, Nebraska, somewhere there when he's living with his mom. And then he comes down to Texas because he wants to play Texas football and do all that, and then has to be the fullback for Boobie Miles. I think Billy Bob Thornton does a great job. So having grew up, we were like the team of destiny for our high school since 7th grade. We were supposed to win the state championship. Our senior year, we do it. I think it really encapsulates that we are so invested in doing this one thing, and everyone's in it. They're all working hard. That like the pursuit of greatness, that really is well encapsulated there. Also being a coach, like you got to coach the boys to be men so much as you're also coaching them to be football players. And you see that like Billy Bob Thornton walks in with Mike Witchell after the bad practice. Like, what do you want? Like, do you even like football? Do you want to leave? And kind of that dynamic with his mom, and he feels trapped. So I think just across the board, Boobie Miles, like with the ACL tear and that doctor's appointment, I got hit skiing and tore my ACL and didn't know, and you just have that kind of emotion around you, like, holy crap, like that was very well done. And then my senior year got cut short because of an injury for wrestling. And like that moment where he like gets everything out of his locker and tells him go be perfect and all that stuff was like still Boobie Miles. But then he gets in the car with his uncle and just like breaks down. I had that moment with my senior wrestling season. So I feel like it's just, everyone has experienced that in the movie, and it's not a lot of the acting is just very well done. So that would be like hands down my number one. The book's fantastic. Read the book, watch the movie, the show.
The TV show. So I get what you're saying, and all those are good moments. I don't think it comes together as well as a whole movie, but I also didn't come to this movie until after I had seen the entire series. And this is a movie conversation, not a TV conversation, but Friday Night Lights is a fantastic TV show. It suffered a little bit from the writer's strike, went off the rails for a second, but it got its legs back. And so going from that really good long form version of it and trying to see it all brought down into 2 hours just didn't hit for me.
Yeah,
but
it is
great.
A little rushed. I will admit. I was sitting there and like, man, they kind of just like blow through the playoffs. But it is interesting, like it's showing they're kind of always paying attention. In our state championship run, we knew like, oh, we got to play Tualatin again. And you're just watching this team do what they're doing, and you're kind of preparing, you're going through the bracket. Like you're focused on your game, but you in the back of your head, okay, Dallas Carter's coming, right? So I just every aspect of it feels like, okay, whoever did this knew what they were doing and experienced that kind of run, right?
That's a good point. Like you can tell the person that wrote it, and I haven't seen the series at all, so I get where you might be coming from on that. So I'm just going based on I've only seen the movie, never read the book, just seen the movie. But you can tell the person that wrote it has experienced it and or knew or has been around people like all the characters, and really all of us who have been in sports have, right? To me, what really hit is that you see kind of a negative way of seeing this, but you see the danger of making football or sports your identity at that age.
Yeah.
Like how that impacts you. Like, because so many kids, they make it their identity, because football in particular, it takes a huge time commitment. And so you just see the dangers of making that your entire identity, especially seeing it as an adult, much older adult now. But also you see kind of the beauty of it too. It's such a unique blip experience in your life that you'll never reach again. Playing football. You could play basketball, you could play softball, baseball later on, but you're never going to play tackle football like that again. But I think it really captures how special that period of life is.
Absolutely. I think the scene that does that is when Billingsley's dad got super drunk and throws the ring out. And then the next morning, he's like, I don't want this to be an apology. He's like, but you don't understand. You got 1 year kind of thing, and going in on that big whole monologue. And then Billingsley just like drops his ring down on it and walks out. You're like, dang. And I don't know, because there are kids like that. Like I still think about, there's some kids on my team. I think like that's the greatest achievement they ever had. And it's honestly like, it's super cool nowadays. Like I'm tight with all of my friends from that team. We have a fantasy football league. We still hang out and all that. But then you have like the Chavez kid where he goes on to Harvard and becomes a lawyer and comes back and like impact, and they talk about that too. Like Chavez is already out. He's 1 foot out. Like he's got Harvard, he's got the grades, he's fine. And so you have just all these different dynamics that are going on. And then another thing that I love about the movie is they don't choose to, because in the end it shows like credits. Coach goes on with Billy Coleman, the backup running back, to go undefeated and win state the next year. They didn't choose to tell that story. They told the story before and all the pressures and how he's in the state championship and they're like, you better win or we as the boosters are going to get rid of you. And you're like, what the heck? Like, I just think it's so well done. But
Rocky loses the fight in Rocky 1. He doesn't win the fight until Rocky 2.
Yeah, so maybe we do get a Friday Night Lights 2, but I don't know, it's so good. I don't want to take too much time though. So good. My next two are kind of football comedies I think are very well executed.
Directly opposing Cole. All right, let's hear it.
The Replacements is just like a Doss Family classic. We watch it, and it's Keanu Reeves is this. I think he went to Ohio State. He loses, gets blown out in the Sugar Bowl, but he's like the number 1 pick and kind of flames out of the league and can't really overcome this. And then the league goes on strike and they sign these scab players. They bring in a coach that obviously the owner had fired and had gone bad. Like Jerry Jones brings back Jimmy Johnson. Right? Jimmy Johnson gets to assemble his team. But I think it does a really good job. Like, it's just so funny. And like the whole team bonding experience, I think it does a good job in terms of that, like coming together as a team. Apparently, though, Keanu Reeves was so good in his preparation because this took place in Baltimore, like the Baltimore Ravens Stadium. And it was like 99, 2000 when it was getting filmed. And the Ravens had the defense, but they did not have the quarterback. They invited Keanu to come in and be a quarterback in training camp. And he's like, nah, I got other projects. And at this point, he was doing like The Matrix and Speed. And like, this is when Keanu was getting big. But you do have like John Madden and some of these other things. They go on and they win a game. And I hate voiceovers. That's another thing. Like, you want to make a terrible movie, as Abed says, put a voiceover. It's just cheap. But he says greatness, no matter how brief, stays with the man. And that just kind of gets you, like, oh, okay. Like, that's the motivational speech that goes on. And then my last movie, The Longest Yard, but the newer one with Adam Sandler. I was just going through movies this weekend. My roommate walks in and I had seen Waterboy and The Longest Yard. And he's like, oh, dude, these are great. But there's tons of football people in there. Michael Irvin's in it. You got Terry Crews, just Bill Romanowski, the poster child of steroids. And they like play jokes on that. And then just random people like Joey Diaz, the Joe Rogan Joey is in it. And then we quote that movie so many times in football. Like, you're just doing practice and you get in there and you do a little hand wave like, I love little Michael. Or you hit someone like, you broke it in my nose. So I think in like Boz, you just have it. And then there's good emotional moments in the movie too, with like Caretaker, and you have this redemption arc of Adam Sandler's character with Shaven Points, and he admits that, and you kind of have the team bonding moment where he's like, okay, like, yeah, this is what's happening. They're going to pin Caretaker's murder on me. And he makes that choice. Like, it's worth it to be on the team. So I think those are just good. But there's just the cliches too kind of stick out in this. I feel like there's some rule in Hollywood. If you're making a football movie, you have to pitch it to the running back and have the running back throw it back to the quarterback on a touchdown or game-winning play. Like that has to be the game-winning play. It happens in, you have it in.
They do a backside George reverse and Remember the Titans. Yeah,
they Remember the Titans. Some trick play to the quarterback, or it happens also in.
I'm sure Varsity Blues did it.
Varsity Blues and Friday Night Lights. It's just it's such a cliche, and then someone has to blow out their knee. Like there's like the two things that have to happen.
One of those actually does happen a lot more than the other one, and it's blowing out your knee.
Yeah, but yeah, so that, and then in terms of like least favorite movies, Rudy, just like you said, there's that try hard that just causes problems, and everyone hates him on the football team, and this movie somehow like celebrates that guy. And then We Are Marshall, one of those movies where you're like, holy cow, everyone in Hollywood was in this, but this is like the transition from rom-com Matthew McConaughey to good actor Matthew McConaughey. He hasn't quite made it there yet. You have the holy shit, it's Jason Bourne guy, is like the university president, the guy from the John Wick movies who runs the Continental is like the board director and the dad of the quarterback. And then you mentioned Mara. She's in there. She can't act to save her life at this point, but her dad or granddad is like the owner of the Giants. And so you have a lot of football people, Captain America, Falcon guys in it. But it's just so forced with the emotion that they're trying to convey. Nothing's really there that makes you think like, oh, this is good football. And I know that's a hot take, like obviously a tragedy. It's a terrible thing that happened, but it's just not a good movie, whether you're looking at it as like a movie or a football movie.
I've got a real quick note on this. So I refuse to watch We Are Marshall because like I take a lot of airplanes at the Scout, and I'm pretty used to like turbulence and things like that, but still like it can freak me out a little bit sometimes. But in my head, I'm like, you know what? We've never really heard of an NFL personnel guy or something, you know, dying in a plane crash, or if I'm with a team or something, you never hear about a team dying except for this. So in my head, I'm like, it just doesn't happen except for this one time. So to me, this never happened.
Yeah.
For my own sake.
It's weird. Goss, you listed everyone else. Also, the main guy from Lost. A movie about a TV show about a plane crash.
Well, he doesn't get on the plane this time. That's what saves him. The scout actually going and scouting saves him. So the scout's going to survive. Mark, you're good. If you ever need to go like do a little scouting, just drive. It's just I can't give. I got 40 minutes in the movie. I'm like, I can't do this anymore, and on to the next one. But yeah, you'll figure it out someday. But to Cole's point, I think watching so many football movies in preparation for this, but none of them are like truly, if I was looking at it like on a film, like I'm going in the expectation, I'm watching a football movie. I just want to have some nostalgia, some reminiscence of what it's like being on a football team again. That like boosts things up. But watching most of these movies, I'm like, man, these aren't great films. You know, like a nostalgia has to go along. There's not truly like a great like Lord of the Rings kind of level.
Well, even baseball, boxing, there's a lot of other sports that do movies better than football. And football is by far my favorite sport to watch. And yet it's like 4th or 5th on my list of sports movies.
I wonder if it's because we know football. That's the thing is like when I watch some of these other sports movies, maybe I don't know some of the intricacies. And if I was a baseball fan, I'd be like, that's total BS right there. But I distinctly remember they're calling a play in the huddle and the replacements and like da-da-da-da-da Y motion. I'm like, I swear on all that is holy, if I don't see a tight end get motioned right now, I'm going to lose it. So that was some things like Gene Hackman clearly had never talked football in his life before the replacements. And like you hear things like, what the heck? But
even really good movies have really corny lines where they're explaining to an audience that doesn't know football, like two people who know football are talking and they're saying the most obvious, you know, 3rd grade football schematic crap. And that's just, you have to wave your hand and say it's a movie. Like Any Given Sunday, my favorite movie, it's a very serious, it's an Oliver Stone movie, still has some lines from Cameron Diaz where she's supposed to be very smart about football and she's saying things that I knew when I was in 5th grade and had never played organized football. Like,
yeah, but that's my list. I'm sure you can tear apart any movie. I usually just try and judge a movie off of what it's selling itself as. And I feel like the few that I picked, I mean, Mark and Cole got some good ones as well. But there's a good cream of the crop, and then there's a lot of what's going on, guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say my partner's sister got into Marshall for PA school. She's not gonna go, but either way, every single time we talked to someone about Marshall, they were like, "Oh, like We Are Marshall," and that was the only thing they could say is, "Oh, like that movie." And you'd ask them, "What's
not
the
even
movie
Randy
about?"
Moss or Byron Leftwich or
Not
some
even
actual Marshall.
Just the movie with Matthew McConaughey. And you'd ask everyone, like, "What do you remember about that movie?" They're like, "Matthew McConaughey." That's the only thing any of us remember about it. I went and saw it in theaters, and I was like, other than his suit coats, his blazers, and the plaid and the '70s look, I don't know anything about this movie. So, to your point, there's not many memorable, great football movies that are on that caliber of, yeah, a Rocky. Like, we don't have one.
Well, the thing is it's an amazing cast. Like you go through and like everyone in Hollywood is in this movie, but it's before they like really get their acting chops. So
Yeah.
it's kind of wild that it isn't as good as you'd expect it to be.
So we really need Mark to also scout for better football movie talent internationally. There you go.
I'm up for that.
Cole, you're down. You're down. Cole, take us through your list. You had to hodgepodge together because you were in the last in the dock. What can you scrape together?
Look, I mean, I have it listed as my third one. I want to shout out because I don't think this counts because no one else went this way, but there are some great football documentaries that are movies out there. I picked Small Potatoes, Who Killed the USFL. Spoiler alert, it was Donald Trump. He's the bad guy of this movie. But that is one of the many 30 for 30s that have done a great job covering football. And some of my favorite 30 for 30s, because football is my favorite sport, tie back to football. So even straight out of LA, June 17th, 1994, which is the day OJ made his escape, and a lot of other things were going on in the sports world at that time. Youngstown Boys and OJ Made in America technically was a movie at first, was eligible for Oscars, but we all know that that is not honoring the spirit of what the Oscars are supposed to be, because really it was a 5-part miniseries, but technically a movie. And so those documentaries get shout outs for me as great documentaries. But as far as scripted movies, the 3 that I got left with, the first one I'll talk about is Draft Day, which is, it scratches an itch the way that Doss was talking about Friday Night Lights originally, where it's something that maybe only appeals to me, and I know that Draft Day is not a well-crafted movie, and it doesn't even have a lot of football integrity either, and does, the actual football of it, even though it's front office stuff, is not realistic, but it at least does a narrative really well. And we get drone shots of actual football stadiums with the actual word mark of football teams. There's a lot of other football movies that don't get the NFL's seal of approval like Any Given Sunday, and they have to just make up the Miami Sharks and all the teams that they play. Draft Day was an NFL thing, and they got inside access to shoot this at Radio City Music Hall at an NFL draft, and it looks super cool and is held together by paper clips and bubble gum to make it an actual narrative, but it's still fun to watch. And it has the advantage of things like horror movies and Christmas movies, where it has tied itself to a holiday, in my book, the Draft Day, where I could go back and watch it every single year. And yeah, it's got the quality only slightly better than a Hallmark Christmas movie, but I watch a lot of those in December also, and so there it is.
Alex and Mark, have you guys seen this one?
So I was very excited when this came out.
You shouldn't have been.
I worked in personnel, for a long time, and I like it's, you got to accept it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I have to remove my personnel side when watching this and just appreciate for what it is. I mean, you talk about scripts that are written for people that don't know what's happening in simplistic things this is like the epitome of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we found out he's a bad guy on draft night. Never mind the 2-3 years of scouting that's been done on him. They found something out the night of or the day of, but it is kind of a hate watch. It's like, oh, this is so wrong and so not accurate, but it's realistic and it's in Music City Hall and they've got their draft boards and the highlight tapes and roster construction
And now every time there's character concerns, we can ask, did his teammates go to his birthday party? And it's so stupid, but now we get to talk about it.
right. So yeah, I saw it in theaters.
Oh yeah, me too.
I watched it and I was like, this is ridiculous. And then I thought, the Browns are the ones who always make these trades on the bad side. It's just like, so I was just trying to, like, it's like a Browns fake news kind of thing where it's like, no, we win these trades, or something. So yeah, I mean, I'll have to watch it again. We had a good long talk on the drive down to broadcasting about it, and Cole opened my eyes to maybe watching it again.
Chadwick Boseman, no matter what. That's my guy. Yeah, and he's got some good sports movies in general that he's a part of. My next one is a little underrated, just maybe because it's older, but North Dallas 40 from 1979. And when Tristan puts together our doc, he always asks us, and even when I was doing all my horror movies, he would pipe in and say where you can watch this. From 1979, you cannot watch this anywhere. I paid myself $5 on Apple to just own this movie on my Apple account, and now I own this and like an episode of TV that I probably bought in 2011 when I didn't understand how iTunes worked, and that's my whole Apple account. But North Dallas 40 is a really good movie. It approaches a football, just a week in football for this aging wide receiver in a similar way that Richard Linklater did Anybody Wants Some. It is the football version of that, and that is a wonderful baseball movie that just does the team and camaraderie part of it. Guys are joking around and just being dudes, but then at the end of the day, you got to come together and like play ball too. There's a little bit of a romance element thrown in on the side, and it's in Dallas. And this is another movie that it's not actually the Cowboys, it's the North Dallas Bulls, but their colors are blue and silver and they wear white at home, and it's the Cowboys. And it's just in that 70s vein of things and showing that old school version of football before it got really refined. I think it just would be so tough to tell one of these football stories in modern day because you get less of the characters that made it through the cracks. And now it seems like a lot of the guys that play football have been trained starting with 7-on-7, like basically AAU for football from such a young age. You're media trained, and there's fewer idiots, and so it's fewer cool characters to have your movie around, which goes into my next one, which is Invincible, which is a less good Remember the Titans as far as the Disney approach, but it's a better Rudy, where it is this just like random white guy tryhard, but it paints him in the right way, and it doesn't pretend that he had some great career. And I guess Rudy didn't either, right? He had one game and everyone threw their jersey in so he could be there. But like Vince Papale really did play in the NFL for a couple of years and had a tackle and a fumble recovery one time. And that's really cool. And for him to point up to the stands where he always used to sit and he knows his guys are at, it's awesome. And Invincible, right? It's the Philadelphia Eagles. It's the story of some random 30-year-old dude that goes to an open tryout when Dick Vermeil got hired as the head coach. Dick Vermeil actually was a really corny dude. Like, it's not unrealistic the way that they paint the coach dialogue scenes in this, because Vermeil doesn't fit the Dan Campbell mold of a football guy. Guys, like, he had a little theater kid in him anyway. So the fact that he's in this Disney movie is true to life at the very least. But also, so it's about the Philadelphia Eagles, and my favorite part is that the girlfriend played by Elizabeth Banks shows up to an Eagles football game at home at the old vet, and she's from New York. She's still wearing her Giants shirt, which just, it reminds me why Taylor Swift has no business rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs when she grew up a Philadelphia Eagles fan and they played in the Super Bowl and she was in the stands in Travis Kelce's box as a Chiefs fan, and it shows she has no football integrity.
Punishable to death.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just think, without Invincible, we don't have a great couple Always Sunny in Philadelphia episodes to parody.
Also true.
Vince Papale. Yeah, this was like, at least for me, this was my first Mark Wahlberg movie I saw growing up. I was like, oh my gosh. Only later did I realize, I'm like, he was in a male porn star movie? What? But yeah, I thought he was like the Disney football quarterback guy. Yeah. Oh, that's too good. Least favorite? We already talked about Rudy, and but I know everyone hates it, but can we just say the score is amazing? No?
I don't remember it. I know a lot of movie
sucks for
scores.
the score.
I've only seen Rudy once because it sucked. I didn't have to go back and revisit. Like the reason I could tell you the Star Wars score off the top of my head, it is good, but also I've seen Star Wars 4,000 times in my life. So
Yeah.
I've seen Rudy once. I don't remember what the music was.
Has Rudy's score ever been used in a TikTok or Instagram post?
Oh my gosh, Timo.
That a boy.
If you're not using it again, it's not obviously not moving you emotionally. And that's an epic component of it.
It's a good score. It's a good score. Just listen to it on its own and try not to think about the terrible scenes it's paired with. That's all I'll say about that.
Hot take, Sean Astin bugs me. Like
Ooh.
Samwise Gamgee, fantastic, one of the top characters of all time. But I don't like. He's annoying. And maybe it's because I tied him to Rudy. That's the thing. Is like I'm like, oh, this Rudy guy.
Season 2 of Stranger Things? Yay or nay?
He's all right.
He's the best part of the season 2. Sean
like
Astin is
Hopper.
great. This is a one dip. It's not the other way around.
I'm a Hopper guy, you know.
My other bad movie that I wrote down here was nominated for 9 Academy Awards in 1978.
I've never heard of this movie.
Must be bad.
Look,
Warren Beatty, excuse me.
wrote, produced, directed, and starred in Heaven Can Wait, which is he kind of wrote. It's an adapted screenplay because it's based on a book, and it was also adapted into an earlier movie featuring a boxing guy where a player in the prime of his life passes away and then gets a chance to, or some guy, he's a musician actually. He passes away in the prime of his life. Warren Beatty does. And then also a football player dies on the same day. And so they let it's been a couple years since I've seen this. There's no way this plot can be right. The musician goes and is reincarnated into the dead body of the football player. So the football player can continue on with his life, but it's the spirit of Warren Beatty, the musician, and he plays saxophone. And at the end of this movie, that was written in 1977, released in 1978. The Rams play the Steelers in the Super Bowl, which actually happened in 1979. So someone was communing with heaven as Heaven Could Wait when they were making Heaven Can Wait. The Rams win, which fortunately did not happen. But yeah, this falls into the camp of it is about football. There were no good football advisors to it, and the football is so secondary in a Jerry Maguire kind of way, but like not as good as of a movie, despite the 9 Academy Awards nominees, at least. I think one out of 9.
This is like Warren Beatty's like height of his career, owning Hollywood back in the 70s. He paid for those nominations.
Yeah, I'm going to go see what else was released in 78.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Heaven Can Wait. You can wait to see it, but apparently it's good, bad?
Nah.
Woof.
One thing I'm surprised nobody said the program. I've never seen it.
I wanted to watch it. I had a hard time
people
finding it because they got super popular with who's the freshman receiver phenom? The Williams kid at Alabama.
17-year-old highlight catch. Yeah.
Where they kill everybody. And then the clip from that where they're watching film, I was like, man, I got to check this movie out. It was pretty well reviewed. I didn't get to it in time.
We kind of made passing mention at Waterboy. It's Adam Sandler. Whatever.
They just like, if you were on a football team and you're a millennial, you quoted that movie so much.
I mean, Forrest Gump has about a third of that movie around the University of Alabama. The fact that he played football for him. Just throwing no one has thoughts on.
No one mentioned The Blind Side as a terrible movie. That's my question here, because I mean, living in Carolina but not being a Carolina fan. When we had Michael Orr, I was like, ooh, "This is the guy from The Blind Side." You know, a woman taught him how to play football a few years ago, and then of course his like fall from the league, and then like disavowing the movie and saying his teammates made fun of him for it. I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
rough."
Any movie, like there's these cliche movies that you can tell not football people make it. They always try and make us out to be closeted gays. And they always want to sit there and talk about how we're stupid and our whole life revolves around it and we'll never accomplish anything else. And I feel like The Blind Side is that. Like, Michael Orr was all about, I'm not dumb. Like, why does everyone think I can't read or do anything? And just the way, like, that's the telltale sign for me that it's not going to be a football movie. Is okay, we're all just closeted gays, we're stupid, and all these things. Like, no, like guys can come together and work towards a common goal and build a strong friendship, and not, So that's like the biggest thing that bugs me.
Hollywood was struggling with biopics and then giving them Academy Awards through the mid 2000s and early 2010s. Like this, Blindside was a bad representation of football. Theory of Everything's a bad representation of science. American Sniper's a bad representation of the American military. Like those are all just bad biopics, and I have no time for them in general.
I'm going to throw out 3 or 4 more movies that are on my mind. Leatherheads. Anyone a fan?
I never watched it.
Oh, George Clooney,
never
John
heard of it.
Krasinski? Okay.
Thought
well,
once back in the day, I wanted to revisit this before. Leatherheads was actually on my short list of like wanting to go back to. I remember it being kind of good, but I didn't have enough takes to get through a podcast talking about it.
Yeah, okay, fine. All right. So Leatherheads, that was 2008. I remember it was filmed in Carolina as a comedy. It's kind of funny. I don't know. Concussion. Is that a football movie or is it an expose?
The smear campaign.
Okay.
I mean, it comes out it's as much of a smear campaign as what came out the same year as Spotlight, where
true.
guess what? It's freaking true, but no one wants to talk about it.
Trying to take down Catholics and
as a
football.
movie, it didn't quite get there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, there's
That's a whole other hour. Radio, before we go. Radio.
Nah.
I just didn't feel like it was a football movie. You know, it's more of this interpersonal group that just happens to take stage in a football setting. You know.
Hey, if we're broadening our horizons, One Night in Miami featuring fictionalized, Jim Brown, and that with fictionalized Muhammad Ali and a bunch of other.
That's a good one.
That's a good movie. It's better than at least a couple that I picked, but no football involved.
Okay, last one. American Underdog, the Kurt Warner story.
41-year-old
anyone
Zachary
see
Levi
this?
playing.
Mark would put his face in his hands.
Yeah, Mark. Let's hear your take on this one.
As a not as an NFL employee, how terrible is this?
You liked this one or you didn't like this?
I haven't even seen it. I wondered who saw it. That's my thing.
I saw it on a plane.
Okay.
I did too. That's the perfect place to watch this movie.
Right. Like, I'll knock this out on this 5-hour plane ride.
Yep.
It could have gone straight to TV. Like, and I'm also just not a fan of the actor. It's just my preference. Just very oversimplified again, once again. And I know Kurt Warner, like really, really good dude, and obviously, incredible story. I know he liked the movie. He's proud of it. I think I was hoping for a little bit more grit. I think that's what I needed, a little bit more edge, a little more grit to it. That's what I was missing.
A little different casting. All right. We've been talking about football way too long. I know it's a Friday night for you guys. Thanks again for coming on, Mark. Thanks again for coming on, Cole and Alex. For everyone interested in watching the good and the bad movies, I'll have all these listed in the show notes and on our website. And until next week, happy Turkey Day. Enjoy the football and watch good movies and TV.